Hi there, it's Jonathan Herbst, founder and CEO of Scale Up Growth Partners. Welcome to our Stories of Scaling Up series, where I interview owners, managing directors, founders, and business leaders at scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspiration for their companies. So today I've got great pleasure. I'm interviewing Kristofer Rogers, who's Director of Payments of EonX and also Managing Director of the Eden Consultancy. Welcome.
A pleasure to be on the show. Thanks. Great to be here.
Thanks, Kristofer. I was saying to Kristofer earlier, I'm a bit amused. I read an article in the Australian Financial Review about Kristofer, so I actually recognised the background from the article. So tell me, what is it you do, and how long have you been doing it? Give us a bit of about yourself.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not in music anymore. Thankfully, I was a one-hit wonder. But I actually learned a lot about technology back in those days because music was one of the early adopters of tech. So I am squarely in the technology business, fintech specifically, financial technology. And I guess, Jonathan, you could call me a payments evangelist. I've been doing payments technology for a long time now. I think close to 14 years, starting with peer-to-peer payments and now running, large payments and loyalty products with EonX, which is actually a listed company. So a full gamut of experience working on, thinking up and growing startups. Okay.
So let's talk about, can we deep dive into that a bit further? Let's talk about EonX. What does EonX do?
EonX is a strange beast. It's two sides to its coins. It's a loyalty platform developer. So we do loyalty programs for the like of Bupa. Your listeners or watchers rather will probably have seen Bupa promoting their loyalty program recently. Benefits for their spend, and that is our bread and butter. But inevitably, with loyalty comes a payments requirement. So EonX have become very good at developing payments technology. So the infrastructure around the payments you and I would do on a daily basis. And most recently, we're now developing the payments infrastructure for MasterCard for an account-to-account play. So a large on-scheme behemoth is moving into the bank transfer business, and we are building that solution. So really exciting, really big clients, which makes us behave in a very different way to how we might have behaved when we were just starting. So a really interesting space at the moment for EonX. And Jonathan, we're about 130 plus people, both on and offshore. So we've been through that growth stage, and we're now consolidating our product and rolling that out to market as well.
Thank you. And what about Eden Consultancy? Because you've got the two gamuts to what you do.
Yeah, that's right. So Eden, like I said, I've been living and breathing payments as it goes through a really transformative state. So payments used to be one thing, card or, electronic bank transfer. And fast forward to today, the world is embracing domestic real-time payments channels, cross-border payments. I've been lucky enough to work on some significant projects in that arena. So now, through Eden, I advise businesses on future trends in payments around financial technology. And I guess, most importantly, the social impact that technology can have on a consumer or customer. So through Eden, I am able to opine and give advice and I guess mentor people that have been through or going through what I've been lucky enough to have gone through. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So I'm going to bring you down to a small level, I suppose. So as a CEO, founder, managing director of a private company, 10 to 250 odd staff. Mm-hmm. Where do they fit into your gamut of advice, for want of a better word?
Where do they fit in terms of how I might work with them, or what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's shared experience. If we think about 8 years ago, even, or more recently, there was not much collaboration happening. We were disruptors launching against incumbents in any particular vertical, right, Jonathan? Yep. But now what's happened, and in my turf, let me speak specifically around banks and fintechs, we are now collaborating more than ever, because those large institutions have understood that they can't keep competing with such agile innovators, so why not collaborate? And I think that's a fair comment amongst all that gamut of your watchers. We work together increasingly. We find synergies, and the World Economic Forum calls that an ecosystem. And that's very new, where many vendors will increasingly work together to drive a value outcome for their customers. And we each do a different part of that mix. The World Economic Forum thinks that's a value chain of about 100 trillion by 2030. So It's a very bankable concept of this whole ecosystem play, right?
Yeah. Wow. So, I'm looking at where you are now. And I know that I think you're in Lennox Head, yeah?
Correct.
If you can put your own hat on, but also the hat of EonX, what actions did you take during the pandemic? And what are some of those actions that will remain, or particularly what actions did you take that will remain in the business going forward?
I think you're right. This is an office I was lucky enough to have built during the pandemic. So it's my little oasis. And I commute everywhere. But base myself here. And it took a pandemic, I think, to prove that you can be as productive, as cohesive as a team to some extent, working remotely. Now, there's a lot of narrative around remote work versus get into the office. I'm a fan of both. I think FaceTime is always going to be absolutely critical on the right terms. But to be honest, the real outcome from the pandemic that will continue and persist is fiscal awareness. Just, in the startup era I was born into professionally, we could raise a lot of money and we could burn it as we chose. And it was more about, well, what is it going to lead to? And no one put an eye on the bottom line. No one actually looked at the revenue, interestingly enough, the multiples, the valuations, the outcomes, all based on product and how much you could raise. Literally, you're valued on the amount you raise. I think the pandemic has sobered us. I think the macroeconomic picture right now has sobered us. And so a lot of startups are thinking, well, let's focus less on that inflated multiple. Let's think about if the cord was ripped today, how long could we persist and what is the true value? And for me, it's not only the ability to generate revenue, it's the ability to retain really awesome people. And that's what keeps me up at night is culture, people, and making sure they're rewarded and attracted to my business. So I think that is something that's common and a direct output of something like a pandemic.
It's interesting you say that. A theme of the CEOs and founders I'm speaking to on this series, those who are raising money, raising investment. 2 years ago, you could get away with revenue projections that, or anywhere. Now the investors are looking for serious revenue, but more importantly, looking at serious profit. With the comment, don't necessarily think you're coming back for another bite. That your burn rate has to be realistic, and you need to be generating real profit. And as you say, it's all about having the right people and keeping them.
That's right. And look, I'm a courageous businessman. I like taking risks. In a sector like fintech, your risk appetite is much higher. I think the lesson I've learned or this has taught me is you have to balance the two. It's a very exciting space, but to run a good business, it has to have bricks and mortar. Not literally, but it has to have a framework.
Yeah, and I think your point about getting together face-to-face is an important one. It seems to be coming, educated gut, because I speak to a lot of CEOs. It seems to be coming down to this hybrid of 2 days a week at least together. Is that what you're seeing as well?
I am. And I think what I've learned is we have a lot of staff. A lot of them are focused in the Melbourne area in Australia. And people were wanting to come back in, but when they did, no one else was. So it has to be synced. So
exactly, and that's exactly the point. It's going to be the same days. Yeah,
that's right. And so I think a lot of companies I'm seeing are saying Tuesdays, Thursdays, come on in, but take up the time that you'd usually waste getting in to do better, more productive things. So it's kind of everyone's on the same hymn sheet there, I think. If it is about people and attracting people, if you're not doing or offering the things that others are, you won't get that same talent. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out for companies saying you must come in again. Now, we run call centers. We have high levels of information security. So obviously there's a dedicated footprint that necessarily have to be within an office space. And there's lots of service industries like that. But it's going to be interesting. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am hopefully a poster boy for the ability to lead companies and do that from my office here in Lennox Head near Byron and make the commitment to fly regularly, almost weekly. But it works.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that because I live in Barrel, which is about an hour and a half southwest of Sydney.
Country.
And my commute these days is from our house, literally across the fence into another house I bought to have as my office.
I've got pictures of you jumping the fence to get to work.
I literally do. And luckily it's not too high a fence. But look at the technology, the conversation we're having from two regional centres. But at the same time, when I get together with my clients for their quarterly planning, we get together and we spend a couple of days together. It's so important for that collaboration.
No, that's right. I couldn't agree more. I thought map a lot of my clients writing around an A3 piece of paper, but then I love bringing that to them, handing it to them, and we walk through their mind map together, and then you get the best outcomes.
For me, it's called Post-it notes.
You're so agile, Jonathan.
Exactly right. So you mentioned a bit about the future. What does the future look like, and what do you see as the main challenges going forward?
Well, I try to look a lot more short-sighted than the mega trends we tend to read about in business. I find looking too horizontal being counterintuitive to what we have to do in the short term. And by that, I mean, the metaverse. Are we pivoting towards it? Quantum computing, what's its impact on financial tools? And whilst that's all well and good, that's a horizon piece many businesses simply can't or won't play to. So the future for me is really, really exciting. I mean, look at technology. Again, I'm an evangelist. I could go on for hours about this, but I love the comparison of an iPod Classic, with 50,000 songs in hand, to the iWatch, which is 90 million songs on your wrist. That's the last 9 years. So I can't tell you today what the mega trend is, but I can tell you we're all preparing for it by conformity, interoperability, standardized messaging, good tech that crosses borders. So when things do happen, we can easily ingest and integrate. And for me, that's a really important part. But that's a technology thing. But I think we all have to be able to speak the same languages, whether that's a coding language or a real language. It's very important that there's that interoperability. That, for me, is the future. And everything we produce and strategize over is to do with that uniformity or compliance, I guess, for want of a better word.
Well, I mean, you look at Apple yesterday. They've launched a new iPad with a USB-C charger rather than the Apple proprietary. Finally.
It finally had to happen. I want to show you my case of leads, but it's too far away to reach.
No, if you could, I've got the background on. If you could see the clutter, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, but it's also, as you say, it's also the that's just a bit of hardware. It's every other piece that fixing as well.
That's right. That's right. It simply has to work together to create a value proposition.
Correct. What do you think has been the biggest learning you've had since you've been a business owner, business leader?
Well, I've been fortunate to have launched businesses since 2008, or before that, actually. My wife and I published a magazine before then, all of which were our own businesses. And you learn lessons within that experience. But actually, after exiting what is today called Zepto, I joined Mambu as a general manager. Now, Mambu, for those that don't know, is a $5 billion unicorn software company based out of Amsterdam. And so coming from a CEO, doing my own raises and my own responsibilities into a general manager role with a much bigger company was one of the best lessons I'd ever had, because I was working within a hyper-scaled business, having to bed down a lot of systems ahead of potentially an IPO. And I enjoyed doing a short tenure as a localized GM to execute a strategy for them into this market, because I learned the other side of the coin. And now I've come back into working as a founder and with founders. I'm applying those lessons as much as I am the hard road I walked for many years before that. So walk in a different business's shoes for a while at the beginning of your career, or in my case, in the middle of one, to get learnings.
It's a really interesting point. It's I'm thinking about that journey. I recently graduated a client who was, or they graduated from the a Fortune 500, the APAC division of the Fortune 500, and in technology. 100 staff, 7 countries around APAC, and I coach the leadership team. And absolutely fascinating for me. The last time I was in a senior role in a large listed company was, Lend-Lease going back into the year 2000 type thing. So it's fascinating going back over the last 3 years working in that environment. Admittedly as a coach and as an outsider, but just a different mind. It's a different mindset and a different way of doing things. Yeah, and such a different scale.
That's right. And now I feel I can see the wood for the trees. I can see busyness and have a high level of clarity. So yeah, very interesting.
That's right. So tell me, the word successful, who pops to mind and why?
The word successful. To be honest, I have young twins, a boy and a girl, and Gabriel is a success at the moment because he's been able to ride a 2-wheeler on grass for a while, but needs a push and needs to fall to stop. This weekend, he learned how to self-start his bike. And for me, that is success. And you can draw so many parables from that, right? Like, to push in, keep going with momentum. It's really when you learn how the wheel turns that is the key to success. So I guess my son. But others, I guess.
That's a fabulous answer. Thank you for that. But
Well, I mean, then I have to give you a typical answer, right? So I guess I find success amongst my peers. So people like Clayton Howes from MoneyMe, Dom Pin from Upbank, even Fred Shabester from Finder. These people have done the hard yards with a high level of belief and bravado and achieved really good success. So I look for peer influence more than I look for page-turning influence through people that aren't in my same, sphere of work. So I look to my network to find success regularly and celebrate it.
Okay. So why are they successful? Dig down there a bit more for me.
Yeah, sure. I think they're successful by being people persons. So if you look at MoneyMe, the ones I mentioned, Finder especially and Upbank, they brought the best people into the best environment. And I really, and I know I've said this today already, but they doubled down on their investment in those people. And that shines those people are either still there or exited successfully and are doing other great things. But they're also got, I guess, what you would call chutzpah. They can get in front of a camera and say something confidently. And I look to those people to emulate them, to be able to back myself and back my business. And I think that speaks volumes to a market and even to a consumer if you're a B2C play. So their success has been partly great product, partly luck and timing. Let's be real. It always is about just a bit of luck as well.
I totally agree. Thank you for that. And I totally agree. I love the story about your son. Having 42 of these stories of scaling up interviews I've done now, the child is your son is the first child that's come up. I've had mums, dads, grandfathers. This is actually one of my favorite questions, as it turns out.
I bet. That's a great question.
Yeah, it really brings out some interesting answers.
Yeah, I bet. I want to watch all 42 again to do it.
Right. Hopefully, I'm getting a bit better as we go along. So, business books, podcasts, leadership autobiographies, anything you'd recommend?
Yeah, there are several. I think if I'm really honest with you, I used to be a deep reader. I studied philosophy, and I think you and I were talking before, and you said readers are leaders. Yep. I'm now more of a TikTok kind of guy, whereby I've got the attention of a goldfish. I'll watch something for 30 seconds and move on. So with that, one of the books I go to constantly is actually The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Yeah, he's a Chinese war philosopher, and that is just a quote by quote inspiration. And side in the village where your customers are, because when the invading armies come in, they're your friends. You can apply this to every vertical and every business. So that's super exciting. The other one is The Brutal Simplicity of Thought, which is actually an employee handbook that MC Saatchi, I've got it here, the ad agency, give to all of their staff. And it simply reminds you about simple things that change the world. So what I saw today is, how do you persuade consumers to buy more? Well, They invented the grocery bag, so you could carry more than you could in your hands. So from paper clips to toilets to shopping bags, this is probably something I digest on a daily basis. And the last thing I'll say is a cheat sheet. It's great to cheat in a noble way. So things like Squiz Today by Squiz Media is a podcast recorded every morning at 6 a.m. by two female journalists to just cut through the noise and tell you what the news is that you need to know that day. So it takes me 5 minutes to listen to these very, very astute journos talk about the news of the day. So I'm a cheat sheet kind of listener, and there's lots of podcasts you can find that summarize things so you don't have to.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting about Saatchi. I have a story about Saatchi. I think a lot of people do. But I was doing my MBA. I was working at the Commonwealth Bank. And I was doing my MBA, and the deal I had was they were supporting me. I had to go back to work at every semester break to work. And one of these breaks, they put me in as pardon me, head of the marketing function within the CBA's personal bank.
Okay.
And this was in the days of Which Bank, and the Which Bank campaign had just started, and I sort of came in literally that stage when they were doing all of the creatives and things for the Which Bank campaign. And so I met the account managers, and we were having a chat. And I said, "How did you come up with the idea of Which Bank?" And this is over company. In those days, lunches had lots of booze. And they told me, they said, "You're probably the first person we've told at CBA this story." I said, "What's that?" Because they put the campaign, the budget, without any detail of what the campaign was, to the board and been signed off. And it was the largest advertising deal in Australia, I think, at that stage, maybe just behind Qantas. And they went running back to the head office, which was in the Rocks, running into the head office saying, "We got it." Running through the office, jubilant. And we got it. And a temp secretary, as they ran by, one of the temp secretaries said, "What did you get?" "We got the bank." And she then followed up with Which Bank. I'm reliably informed that's a true story about how they came up with this concept.
And the rest, as they say, is history. The simple things, listening to everybody, not missing a beat. It speaks volumes to the things we've covered today.
Correct. And the other part of that story was, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this to you on TV, but so I'm going to be, I'm hoping that my background isn't too bad.
Remembering this is caught in prosperity. There we go.
That's not too bad. So, where am I? The CBA logo, is this thing with a black triangle in the corner.
Yes.
The other thing I was told, I don't know if it's totally true, was that is a piece of toast dipped in Vegemite, and that the corners of that logo of that thing is actually, which is true, are the stars of the Southern Cross.
Well, there you go. It's the Vegemite thing that got me. That's brilliant.
That's right. But apparently that's true too. Anyway, I'm well and truly digressing where we are.
Well, today
any last piece of advice or parting words for aspiring entrepreneur out there?
Wow, there's so much, but I guess you've got to back yourself. I think I mentioned that earlier today, that a lot of us, me included, go through this crisis of faith. Can we really do it? And it took moving to Australia at the turn of the century to find an environment where I could give things a go, launch businesses. And I think too many great ideas don't see the light of day. I have great dinner conversations with ideas that I see as brilliant, but we as people have an opportunity here to launch great ideas and be supported to do them. So have belief in yourself, but then the worst thing that can happen is to continue to believe in yourself when it comes to scaling a business. Trust others, know that people can do it as well as you can, and there will come a point where you have to hand over the rails and your business becomes about its future, not your future. And a lot of founders struggle with that moment, and that moment in time will come if it hasn't already, and it's how you let go that is just as important as how you grabbed on in the first place.
That is a great piece of advice. And interesting enough, I've done 2 of these stories today. I've just got off an interview with David Walcott from a company called Booze Buds. The co-founder of Booze Buds. And he has, when I got on, I just do my research as I normally do. And I'd see that he's finished there this month. And I said to him, what are you out of a job? And he said, he's been the CEO for many years, and he realised it was time to bring in someone who is able to scale it in a different way to the way he does. And we had a good conversation about exactly the point you just made, Kristofer. So it's well worth watching that one as well.
Will do, and thank you again for having me on.
Thank you. I've had as I said to you earlier, I love this is the one part of my business apart from coaching that I just won't delegate. I love the conversations, and I have as well. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.